I don't even want the whole intro to play. I just want to jump on here with the guys and say good morning to those of you who are watching in the continental United States, which is most of you guys who tune in for the Way Forward show. Y'all get up in this thing today. Jason is going to be joining us here in just a few moments, and we're going to be talking about a very sad story that comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And what are we going to make of this? Christians being beheaded for their faith, Islamic terrorism, the geopolitical situation in Africa. Is there just a little bit of amnesia or bias that we have toward some of the African genocide that's taking place there? We got to get into all of that today, and no better than Jason to help us to get into that. Yes, sir. You want to come in?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Well, folks, the comment section is turned on. This is actually a live show. Last week, we couldn't do it live because of various responsibilities that we had. We are here. So bring the smoke, bring your comments. We're going to be talking about a sad story, but it's one that we got to get into today because we man up in this thing. Be men, have courage.
You got to talk about it because nobody else is.
Exactly. And that's one of the aspects.
Crickets right now.
One of the aspects.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, man. I didn't mean to cut you off like that.
No, I didn't mean it to keep talking. See how we can just defer to one another.
Right.
That's what the show is all about.
I was reading a Newsweek article on this, and you got the Hungarian representative like calling out for the world to talk about it. You got the aid organizations talking about it. You just don't have anybody else in the West talking about it. Like, I just was found that odd.
Well, nothing happened this week except for some budget cuts in the government.
Yeah, that's right. You're messing with our money. Some
appointments to Trump's cabinet.
That took center stage over 70 people losing their life because they love Jesus.
Now, they did talk about Israel and some of the bodies that were returned and the response of Hamas to that situation. Yeah. That was quite sad. I saw footage of it. I saw stories about it. People were covering that. It's very sad. It's very sad. I hear anything about this?
Well, America loves Israel. Yeah.
Jump in the comments. We're going to get into that today. I've got a couple of videos that I'm going to show that are heartbreaking. If you guys have not followed or heard about this story, I'm going to be sending this out to my prayer team. So if you're in House Church Nashville, we'll be coming. We'll disseminate this to our prayer list, but we'll also try to disseminate this as far as we can. Let your friends know that we're having an important discussion today. I couldn't, for some reason, Jason, get the thumbnail to work today. And it may be because there wasn't a graphic image. It was just people in Africa running around. Maybe AI has just filtered all black people out. AI is racist today.
Not for the Way Forward, though. You just blurred today. You just blurred today. Look how bright I am, though. I look pretty white. Like, look at this.
Exactly.
It looks good, doesn't it?
What if AI was racist?
What if? Listen, you have some theories that have yet to be discussed that I'm becoming more intrigued.
Oh, brother.
As I read about AI and as I look into AI and I hear you talk a little bit, I'm like, ooh, I really want to hear what Erskin has to say about the deception, the end times, AI.
The problem.
Yeah.
The problem is
she's scared though.
I'm not scared. I'm not scared. And if I say I'm not scared again, it's probably because I'm scared. I'm trying to convince myself that I'm not scared.
You're scared.
But I'll just say this. I have sources that are higher up than I should have in the government. You guys know I wanted to run for president of the United States. And so
one day
I had mentioned that a couple of times, and then I started accumulating. And my wife is like, absolutely not. I would never want that job. Never, not in a million years. So
Kelly,
she doesn't want me. Nope. She doesn't want me to do that. But because I had put that out to some other people who were just like, hey, providentially, I keep ending up in places where those kind of things. I mean, it could happen. I know some of the people who are some of the people who are some of the people. So I start getting sources and some information about things. And you know this about me, Jason. I am not, N-O-T, not a conspiracy theorist. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. You got a little itch in you, though. Come on.
I don't know. People said they're glad that we're talking about this. Carol,
Yeah.
we're going to be talking about it here in just a few moments. We'll get past all the silly stuff. Let me get past all the tags here, Jason. Let me do this. Let people know that the Section 107 Act of 1976 allows us to be able to talk about stuff like this. Comment. This would be under the guise of news reporting, scholarship, and research. So the proprietary videos that I'm showing are not my own. However, we will need them today for the purpose of illuminating this very critical and very important issue that we should all be praying about. For those of you who are watching on various platforms, thank you so much for that. If you're not already subscribed to the Way Forward Show, you can subscribe specifically to the Way Forward Show. And I looked the other day, Jason, and on YouTube, it's populating our episodes. They keep coming. They keep coming. And so if you've not already done that, then go ahead and subscribe. Where's that?
One day we'll be 40.
One day we'll have 40 subscribers.
Good.
What was that? What was that, Jason?
Oh, you got to have a sense of humor. It's good.
It's just a matter of time, brother. It's just a matter of time before we break through. And what's funny is I interviewed my sister yesterday because she has a viral video that went viral on TikTok. And that's just such an interesting phenomenon that a lot of times people will just get on and they'll do a little rant or they'll do a little just whatever. And it just blows up.
Yeah.
There's really no rhyme or reason to it. Like people just start sharing it and sharing it and sharing it and sharing it and sharing it. And I think some of the content that we have on this show is incredible. People should share it and share it and share it and share it and share it. And how the Lord uses all that and when and all of that, how he uses that, that's his business.
Yeah.
But we're going to put the content in its place and let the Lord do what he wants to with it. So could you lead us in a word of prayer?
Yeah. Father, we're so thankful, Lord, for this morning. Just ask you bless our show, bless our time together. And Lord, just be with the Christians in the Congo, Lord. Just ask for courage and empowerment and strength to continue to testify of the worth of our Lord. We ask in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Let me turn that down there. All right, folks, let's get to this first soundbite that we have. Would you roll, producer, would you roll soundbite 303, if you would? You know, guys know that I'm the producer of the show, so I'm just saying stuff.
Yeah, I'm higher.
Y'all know what we do. We gonna make it till we make it. At some point, there will be a producer that's offset that's like, hey, roll 303, would you please? Thank you. Thank you for that. But here is what I think would be a helpful starting place to get a more holistic understanding of what's going on in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and also to have a little bit of context about how Islamic terrorism is factoring into this, the geopolitical situation. And so I'm not really going to make too many comments about this as it's playing, because I think all of it is rich background, not a lot of wasted space on this. And so let me just get this to you guys now.
Of violence, the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, has once again become a blood-soaked battleground for Islamist militants. On February 13, 2025, a horrifying attack unfolded in the northeastern territory of Lubero, where 70 Christians were beheaded inside a Protestant church in Kasanga. The perpetrators? Suspected members of the Allied Democratic Forces, ADF, a ruthless group with ties to the so-called Islamic State, ISIS. This latest atrocity has sent shockwaves through the Christian community and underscored the growing Islamist stranglehold on parts of the DRC. The nightmare began at 4 a.m. in the village of Maba. According to field sources, ADF militants crept into homes under the cover of darkness, whispering a deceptive command. Get out, and don't make any noise. 20 Christian men and women obeyed, only to be seized by the armed intruders. As the local community rallied to devise a rescue plan, the militants tightened their grip, surrounding Maba and abducting another 50 believers. The captives, 70 in total, were marched to the church in Kasanga, where they met a gruesome end. Their severed heads are a stark testament to the barbarity now plaguing the region. Even after the killings, the terror persisted. Until February 18, families couldn't bury their loved ones due to ongoing threats. Many Christians have since fled, joining the swelling ranks of the displaced. This gruesome massacre, reported by field sources and local leaders, marks the latest chapter in a relentless campaign by the ADF to assert dominance in the DRC's volatile northeast. The group, which pledged allegiance to IS in 2019, has transformed from a shadowy Ugandan insurgency into a formidable jihadist force, exploiting the region's instability to sow terror. The church in Kasanga, once a sanctuary, became a slaughterhouse, its walls bearing silent witness to the execution of believers whose only crime was their faith. The ADF's reign of terror is not new, but it's intensifying at an alarming rate. Since 2014, the group has ramped up its assaults, starting in Beni territory in North Kivu province. The violence has since spilled into Irumu and Mombasa in Ituri province, and now Lubero is in its crosshairs. In the past month alone, the ADF has slaughtered over 200 people in Baswaga chiefdom, according to local reports.
All right. So if you're following along, this is no more than 12 days or so old. We're just now hearing about it to some extent in the United States and with some of our media. But I wanted to keep that in mind as we're talking about this today, that even the fact that we're just now hearing about it means something with regards to how much this kind of story is passed over. And I couldn't let the whole thing play. I have to make comments. There has to be at least 10% of a proprietary video that's altered. And so by making a comment now, I'm altering the original content.
This relentless campaign has propelled the DRC 6 spots up the World Watch list, landing at number 35. In 2024, 355 Christians were killed for their faith, up from 261 the year prior, while an estimated 10,000 were uprooted, a tenfold increase from 2023. The numbers tell a story of devastation: looted and torched homes, shuttered schools, abandoned villages, and a healthcare system in collapse. Adding fuel to the fire, the M23 rebel group, allegedly backed by Rwanda, has exploited the chaos, further endangering Christians caught in the crossfire. The ADF's vision is clear: to carve out a proto-state governed by Sharia law, with eastern DRC as its battleground. As Congolese forces struggle to contain the threat and regional tensions with neighbors like Rwanda flare, the Islamist grip tightens. With ISIS's ideological backing, the group has morphed from a local insurgency into a sophisticated terror network, leaving a trail of bodies and broken communities. For the DRC's Christians, each day brings fresh fear of abduction, execution, or displacement. As the world watches, the question looms: how much longer can this beleaguered nation withstand the Islamist onslaught?
All right, Jason. That's the sad reality of what's going on in the world. Let me just put that world persecution list that's up there. All right. I don't know where you want to begin, but I kind of have 4 points of reference. If we get to all of them, that's great. But I want to talk about terrorism and the geopolitical / religious things related here. I want to talk about immigration. I want to talk about how the media has overlooked this, what the responsibilities of the church are, how do we pray for folks in persecution. All of those things I want to at some point get to and touch on, but I don't have a clear outline today, as it's just horrific situation.
It's so shocking, you know. It's like you're just watching that and you're just thinking 70 men, women, children, no mercy. And the article I read said they were cut with knives, you know.
Yes.
It's one thing to hammer a massive sword, right, or to shoot with a gun, but that knife thing is just a very visceral attack. The amount of hatred that it's coming across. How do you slaughter 70 people that way? It's just got to be demonic. You know what I'm saying? Like it's got to be. I mean, I've felt hatred in my heart at times, right? Malice for my brother. But by the grace of God, you know, the gospel immediately comes in there and says, no, because that leads to this.
Yeah.
Hatred unchecked, like just fully given over to the kingdom of darkness. You can
This
walk
is-
in,
yeah.
slaughter people. This is
Well,
shocking.
it's shocking, but I'm trying to get people to understand that it's not that shocking. It's not that shocking when you watch, and I had a good visual last night. I was watching, I was not watching a movie. I was watching the bodies of some of the Israeli people being returned, and all the people from Hamas who were standing around and they were cheering that these dead bodies were being delivered back to Israel. And they had a caricature and a picture of Netanyahu kind of painted like a demon, and it's like a whole culture. And so it's like women, children, men who are just all standing around and they're cheering. And you think, how barbaric and base and guttural and evil and demonic do you have to be to look at this scenario with no human decency whatsoever, no propriety whatsoever? And you recognize that when you're reading the Old Testament, when God would tell people to go in and destroy everybody, destroy them all, there's a reason. God knows what he's talking about. I'm not going to come back and try to inform God and try to tell God that he didn't know what he was talking about with reference to a group of people, because if you don't destroy them all, the seeds and the tendrils of what happens after that, they're going to try to destroy you. And we still live in a kind of world that we get snippets of it now, where people have such barbarity in their hearts that they have no regard whatsoever for life. If the Lord doesn't intervene and do something, they will kill you.
You're not viewed as human in their eyes, and that's how Hamas and Israel see each other. Like you're not human. You're an animal. You're something other than, and the image of God is lost. And and I guess I should clarify. I'm not shocked that it happened. We read the gospel, and Jesus told us if they hated me, they're going to hate you. And he actually goes on in Matthew 5 to say, "Count it blessed if you get persecuted for my name's sake," right? Because it actually proves you belong to me. So I'm just shocked at the violence of it. I'm like, I guess I'm shocked. I'm sad. Maybe I'm saddened. I'm watching a group of people here who've got so much potential and glory in the Congo, and it is being ravaged by darkness. And it's being ravaged by hatred. Everything that we hate about the kingdom of darkness, it just seems like it's blossoming there. And all we're seeing is this sadness. It's not even just the slaughtering of the Christians, but the whole thing is failing. The whole thing of the Dominican Republic is failing under this darkness, and there's no way out of it but a revival, but a gospel, but a missionary send, right? Something to happen, to which the world then pushes back and says, no, we don't need any more Christians going over there. We just need democracy. I don't think so, Willis. Because that's not working. They're the Allied Democratic Force. Is that what they call themselves? I don't see no democracy here. I don't see no tenets of the rule of law. I don't see no freedom. I see nothing but terror. And I guess that's where I am. And man, how important is it for us to never lose the sight that we're made in the image of God? No matter how much I dislike an ideology, no matter how much I don't like what's being put out there by people I disagree with, I can never, ever, 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 ever lose sight that these people are made in the image of God. I can never do that. If I do that, I'm just as capable of these people, right? It's crazy. I guess that's what's shocking to me. I guess I don't know. Maybe
that was a good clarification. And jump in the comment section and your reactions. Obviously, a lot of sadness, a lot of heartache, discouragement, all of those things. Jump in the comment section and share some of those if you have opportunity. But yeah, I think Jason, you're right to identify and try to highlight the fact that we're not for the grace of God. And I know we return to that point over and over again as we have these sort of church rally moments, but we're not for the grace of God. Let none of us think that we're so far beyond this, that this would not be the barbarity of our hearts or the informing of our worldview, that we could be radicalized to a particular point. that we could be incensed to a certain point, that we could be manipulated to a certain point. And certainly you bring in an aspect about how demonic this is, Jason, that I think is underscored by the fact that there is really a spiritual warfare that is going on. And it weaves itself in and out of these geopolitical situations whereby we're talking about ISIS and their influence, and we're talking about militant Islamic groups that are there, but we're also talking about targeting of Christians. Let that please be understood in what it is that we're saying today, that they snuck in under the cover of night and had the Christians that they were aware of gathered together in a place of their worship so they could slaughter them in their worship. And that is making a profound statement about what they believe about Christianity. Let's be clear about that. Let's be clear.
Martyrdom, Christian martyrdom is a problem. I know the West doesn't like to say it is. I don't know how many people I've spoken to here in the States who just will not acknowledge it, that Christians are being persecuted because they're so trapped in our bubble. Because, you know, in the West, we're not persecuted like this. I think it's increasing. I think there's a growing disconnect that's happening between the church and the culture, which we talk about a lot, about the great divorce that will happen, but not like this. Like, we haven't seen this. This is a violent attack that's being not only being ignored, but there is no justice coming for this, because nobody in the West wants to just talk
on
about
this side of glory.
That's right. On this side of glory. That's right. So it's like, no, if it doesn't happen here, it doesn't exist.
Yeah. Do you remember last week when I said, well, last week we didn't have the show where we were actually on in real time?
I watched. Yeah, I actually enjoyed the show. What I thought was funny. I didn't mean to cut you off again, but you and I are weirdly connected with how we think. I may say it one way, you may say it another, but we're
tracking. Yeah, we're
saying the same thing.
We're definitely tracking. I tried to not watch. I heard about 10 seconds of what you were starting to say, and I was like, oh, no, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
Because I want to actually say what it is that I have to say, and then see what he has to say, and then that was funny because it was revealed to me in real time. But last week when I was talking about the fact that I'm uncomfortable, I'm literally uncomfortable, folks. If you're in the United States of America and you're in the contiguous United States, I'm uncomfortable when we use terminology like persecution, and we have an office to root out anti-Christian bias. And then when people will use the word bias and persecutions as synonyms, and I go, ooh, people don't like our ideas. They don't like our pro-life stance. They don't like a lot of things about what it is that we're doing. But persecution, as I understand, martyrdom is reserved for situations like this.
Yeah. Well, I think we're a wee bit soft serve, though, aren't we? I mean, if I could,
I just think we have to get this out. I'm sorry that the thumbnail didn't work today, and that there's not more people that could watch this. I'm going to try to maybe send this to some folks today and just let them know that, like, we need to be talking about this. And I know it's uncomfortable, like abortion and those things is uncomfortable, but there's some uncomfortable things that we must, as a result of being followers of Christ, reach into to shape worldviews and to shape hearts. You know, I was listening to George Barna yesterday, and he was giving a report. 1 in 10 Christians actually have a biblical worldview, 4% biblical literacy, and he was going down some of those metrics. And I was thinking to myself, just because a person goes to church doesn't mean that they're ever going to develop a worldview unless you very intentionally disciple people and they become a fully devoted, fully committed follower of Jesus Christ. Somebody who says, I believe in Jesus, and yet is not devoted to the cause of Christ.
Yeah.
That's, like you said, soft serve. That's soft serve.
We are actually having that conversation right now at FBCL, where we are discussing our discipleship, and we're kind of revamping some things, because when Sonny and I sit down and talk about discipleship, which he's the pastor over now, he is what do we want? We want growth, we want maturity, we want sanctification, we want to develop our worldview. How do we see this world, and how do we reach this world? And what we were doing was okay, but it wasn't as effective. Yeah. Now we're coming up with this strategy to, hey, we need to help our church members develop the right biblical worldview so they can live as salt and light,
Mhm.
right, in this world, and be able to withstand what is coming to us. It's not quite here yet, but I believe it's on its way, because it's one of the ways that God is actually going to joyfully advance His kingdom is going to be when we actually take a beating or two, just as we saw it in Acts 8, when the church was persecuted and they finally went out, because the believers are going to share. They're going to be bold and be courageous.
Yes.
Right now we're comfortable and we're maybe upset about some things, but we're not to the place where I think we can be and we will be. So my job as a pastor is to equip the church, according to Ephesians 4, with the worldview and the tools to live that life so they can go do that. And if your church is not doing that, is there not intentional discipleship, you might even be willing to look at this and say, well, this is sad, but really doesn't relevant to me.
Mhm.
And yet I look at this and weep and just think, these are my brothers and sisters, and I cannot believe the tragedy and the terror they're going through, and I weep with them, and I want my church to weep with them, and I want us to be about feeling what they feel and being willing to go and be a solution to what they need. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That just doesn't happen, by itself. It has to be intentional.
Sure. And I'll echo that, maybe follow that up. And I don't know exactly what you guys have talked about in your discipleship meetings. I don't necessarily need to know what you guys are talking about in your discipleship meetings, but I'll just say this to anybody who's out there. Everybody, turn your screen on. I'm looking directly at you when I tell you this. If you go to church from Sunday to Sunday and your only experience, or Sunday to Wednesday, and your only experience is you grab your Bible, go to church, sit there, listen to the message, go home, do whatever you're doing, show up on Sunday, you are not developing a biblical worldview. You are not seeking to become a disciple of Jesus Christ. I was convicted yesterday, Jason, when I was listening to George Barna talk about how low the bar is for discipleship. And we've done this to ourselves. Churches, pastors, you've done this to yourselves. If we are not going to call people to be fully committed to Christ, to actually be a disciple, then what are we doing? Yeah. What are we doing? And if you go to a church, but you're not actually a member of a church, shame on you. You say, well, how do you trace that out biblically speaking? You don't have to trace that out by actual Bible verses, because the people who were in the Bible got killed for their faith. You were walking around like, church is optional today. Sports teams, all these other things that are going on. And because of that, these kind of things don't pierce your heart like Jason is talking about. These kind of things don't become the topic of your conversation. They don't become the topic of your feed, the topic of your interest, the topic of your concern as you bring these things to various prayer lists and prayer circles that you might find yourself in. Hey, what about the Kansas City Chiefs? You don't think they're going to get an offensive line this year? Well, what about these 70 Christians who were killed the other day?
Decapitated. Decapitated, by the way. They were killed, but they were brutally murdered. Yes. Brutally murdered.
And so there's some things culture-wise that just need to change with regards. It's not, I don't even think it's life on life, Jason, but it's life among lives. Life among lives. It should be characteristic of our lives. All right, I'm going to say something provocative here, which is any surprise. Let's say something. In your face, sucker. I'm going to ask the question of, if this had happened in Israel, do you think it would have gotten more media coverage?
Yes, I knew you were going to ask this question, because in our opening intro, and you talked about the Hamas thing, and I'm looking at this thinking, had this happened in Israel, and I held back. I'm like, I think we're going to talk about this. I just
have to ask the question.
Well, I think you're right. I think you're right to ask the question.
If this happened in Israel, 70 people killed, beheaded, even for religious and geopolitical reasons.
Yeah.
Would we be talking about it today? Yes. Or would it just be on the back page of the last page of some op-ed story that's out there? What do you think, Jason? What do you think, people out there? If this had happened anywhere else in the world where there's people, maybe, can I say it like this, Jason?
Oh, I know you're going to say it. Go ahead.
Have this happened anywhere else in the world where there's people whose skin is not kind of darkish?
I knew it.
Well, why didn't you just go ahead and say it for me? Since you knew I was going to ask that question, why don't you just go ahead and say it for me? if the skin tone had been a little darkish or a little lighter than this, do you think we would have elevated this in our news stories?
Man. Okay.
I got a clip to play, so I'm going somewhere with this. That was the setup.
I figured you would have.
Cue up clip 405. But go ahead, Jason.
Israel is so much easier to love than Africa is, I think, for America. I don't even know why I say it that way, but oh man,
why are the Jews so much easier to
love?
Why?
We are infatuated with Israel. I guess maybe because they're, God's chosen people in the Bible.
People, yes. And these people are not God's chosen people.
Yeah, they're
just people in the image of God.
That's good. Oh my gosh. So here I'm a white guy and I'm trying to navigate this carefully.
Justify this for us. Make it make sense.
Make it make sense. Well, we just like white people. Just it's like they're just easier to love. All of them, right? No, I don't. I want to say first. Okay, I want to say first and foremost. I think it's because of the whole Israel dispensational that captured America. I've got friends who are really infatuated with Israel. Everything's about Israel, and I don't know if they recognize the racial side of it, but there is. And then there's a part of me that also believes, and I think I've seen this, that if you look at Israel, they're more like us than, say, the Congo. They're sophisticated, they're civilized, they're democratic. They're
going to get into that,
right? And then you look at the Congo, and it's your hood. It's the ghetto of the world. Does that make sense? Like Israel is kind of your suburbs. And then the Congo is kind of the hood.
I might need this. Producer, get this clip.
I think
Israel is the suburbs. The Congo is the ghetto. Continue.
And I know I'm getting myself in trouble here, but I mean, there is a way. And if anybody were to take this clip and just edit it, boy, I'd be the last trouble.
This is what you get, folks, when you watch a live stream. Look, folks, there's no wires attached to us. We're not going and editing this and making sure we say the right things and have the little clips that come in. No, we want you guys to have the raw, unfiltered, he's a pastor, but he's about to get fired kind of experience.
So when we sit down, we talk about this all the time, right? We sit down on the couch when we're visiting, and we're this is what we'd say. We would say, there's a part of this where people are infatuated with Israel because it's Israel. Israel's God's chosen people. They're part of the Bible. They're with the dispensationalism that's been, very influential throughout our culture over the last 100 years or so. That's part of it. I don't want to deny that part of it, but there is this sense that of all the Middle Eastern countries, maybe aside from Dubai, there's just a lot of wealth over there.
I was in Dubai a few months back. That's ridiculous.
Israel seems to be a lot like us. They're just easier to relate to. They're easier to, and so I would put it into layman's terms, like, Israel's kind of the suburbs, the wealthier side of the tracks, and then the Congo's the hood. It's the ghetto. It's where, and then what happens to be over there? Just a lot of black people.
And I don't want to make it seem like, ooh, Jason they got him now. They got a soundbite that they can put on Jason. Let me join you in saying what you just said, because this other gentleman is about to come in and say it a third different way. It is much easier to love, folks, the Jewish people and their plight and their calls and concern for them than it is these backwater people on the other side of the tracks.
70 Christians have been found beheaded. Yes, beheaded in a church in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Why is no one reporting this? Why does no one seem to care? Well, let me bring in Dexter Van Zyl, an expert on anti-Christian violence. Dexter, what can you tell us about this absolutely barbaric atrocity?
Okay, well, first of all, it took place in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is a huge country with about 105 million people, that right now is basically in a conflict with neighboring Rwanda over territory in Kivu, okay? And the violence was perpetrated by an organization that was affiliated, that is affiliated with ISIS. And the thing is that there are some people who have argued that they are essentially working on behalf of Rwanda, because Rwanda is a neighboring country that covets and is actually taking control of an awful lot of the mineral resources in Kivu. And so what this violence has done is demonstrated that the Congo cannot protect its citizens from violence in Kivu or in North Kivu. And so what people are worried about is that this is essentially an attempt to kind of destabilize the Democratic Republic of Congo and legitimize Rwandan claims to the minerals in the region. And I don't want to underestimate or downplay the ideological hatred by the perpetrators of this group who murdered these Christians. But the thing is that it's taking place against a backdrop of geopolitics in Africa. And what has happened is, and so if the Congo, under the leadership of Felix Tshisekedi, can't protect its borders, essentially it's going to have to go for help outside the country, and the people live there, and that's why people are worried about it. The Congolese that I've spoken to here in the States say, I said, wait a minute, are you telling me that the Rwandans are supporting this attack? And they said, yes. And I said, but Rwanda is a Christian nation. And they said, yes, but this will help destabilize the region where all of these minerals.
Like U.S. is a Christian nation. It's good. It's good. So still these labels on there.
So what do you think about this so far?
That's true. I mean, I think all crime like this happens in the backdrop of something. You know, it's just part of Satan's domain.
Yeah.
I don't. Nothing's done in a vacuum or isolated. It's always layered and leveled. So yeah,
I think that's good for people to know the geopolitical. He's gonna jump into some of those reasons like we were talking about here. We're not going to be the only two that are on this broadcast today talking about the backwater ghetto.
Used for the iPhones that we make, that we use in our lives. And so clearly there's an ideological and a theological component going on, but there's also a strategic issue as well.
Oh,
it's terrible, isn't it? It's hard. As a former Peace Corps volunteer, I served in the Congo for about a year, 14 months in the 1980s. And the problem is that if this violence is allowed to continue and the average Congolese learns and recognizes, and the violence like this against Christians perpetrated by jihadists is not a new problem. It's been a problem in North Africa for
now he's about to ask
a long time. Yeah. And the problem is that trying to get people to pay attention to it is very difficult.
Well, that's my second question is you see the headline, 70 Christians beheaded, and you think, this what? You almost can't fathom that headline. But is Islamic violence against Christians in Africa, is this an anomaly basically?
Oh no, absolutely not. This takes place in a number of countries throughout the region. And there are some people who are worried that essentially what we're looking at is a jihad against Christians in numerous other places in North Africa. And routinely we hear reports of these acts of violence. And the problem is that what happens when the Christians start to fight back? Are we going to start to see the equivalent of an interreligious war in the continent?
I want us to pause there for just a moment because I'm in Texas and I'm watching y'all drive around y'all's big trucks. And Jason, not to have a moment of levity, but I knew I was in Texas yesterday when I was in the gas station, and I was kind of in a gas station in a hood. And they kind of got that conceal or open carry kind of thing going on in Texas. Yeah. Yeah. There was a brother that came in with some gym shorts on, and he had his gun stuck down up in his gym shorts.
Oh man. And
I was like, I mean, I am in Texas. And the other thing that lets me know that I'm in Texas is when I'm at any place, and there's all these big dually trucks that are around me.
Yeah.
And I turn because I'm in my Mazda 323, and I turn because it's a little car compared to all these big dualies. And I turn to get out of my car, and I'm getting out, and then there's like a little lady that's getting out of the big dually truck. Next to me. I'm like, yeah, I'm up in Texas for sure.
Yeah.
So I know I'm in Texas,
She's telling you that you have larger genitalia than she has larger genitalia than you do. That's what she's telling you.
No, she's not telling me anything. All right, she's not telling me anything.
That's what the big truck means in Texas. I've got.
No, I'm telling them something when I get 34 miles to the gallon. All right,
Yeah,
that's what I'm telling them. And traveling all over the country. But I say all that because I know with the sensibilities of some of the people who are conservative, Second Amendment people who watch this show, you're probably thinking, all right, we need to, like, if we're going to arm our schools because it's a soft target, arm our churches, we have security teams that are there. Maybe we arm these Christians who are there, or in some case, figure out how to help them defend themselves or fight back. I know that's a sentiment that people have out there. What's your thoughts on that? What's your take on that? Did they just here we are? Just come shoot us.
Jesus advocating that in the scriptures. As much as I would want my flesh to do that, I just can't see anything in what he's teaching, saying to arm yourselves. This is what I think got John Piper in a little bit of trouble on the one hand, but at the same time, he inspired a massive group of people into missions. Was this idea that we don't go and kill people for the gospel. We go and lay our lives down for the gospel. It's a massive calling. It's not one that's it's not a willy-nilly calling. It's not, we don't just say that as if like those words don't mean something. The sacrifice, the call to go and do I really believe this gospel? That lands hard on American ears.
Yes, it
I
does.
can remember being a young man listening to him make that call to these 20-something missionaries to say, look, we're not going there to get more stuff. We're not going there to have a safe and comfortable life. We're going there knowing we're probably not coming back. And he took that from the 1800s revival and the great missions that came out of the Second Great Awakening, and then also during the Industrial Revolution, where these people like Adoniram Judson and these people like John G. Patton going to New Hebrides Islands, who left their fathers and mothers knowing they're never going to see them again because they're trusting in heaven, in an eternal reward. And so Jesus seems to always point our eyes to the kingdom, always be thinking about the kingdom, not arming yourselves for this world, because it seems like the gospel is best spread when the blood of Christians seems to fertilize the soil. Not because we're fighting, but because we're willing to lay our lives down for it. That speaks volumes. And I know I'm saying this sitting in a very comfortable chair with all my American stuff, but it doesn't make the message any less true.
Yeah.
That if you look at the Bible in Acts and you look at even Christian history, the gospel seems to be spread the best when we are laying our lives down and we're learning obedience through suffering, and we are manifesting the gospel when it's very difficult. People see it. People with hardened hearts. Richard Wormran. I mean, read his story, how he's winning over communists. It wasn't because he was fighting back and going dukes with them. He made this agreement with his guards. You can beat me, and I'm going to share the gospel with you. And he won. And he won guards over. And eventually, it even fell, right? Romania fell. So, the world's strategies are not like the gospel strategies. So I cannot, as much as my flesh would like, yes, give them guns and let them fight back, I just cannot validate that in the scripture and say, yeah, that's the way Jesus wants you to get it done. And I know what the pushback is going to be. Well, he doesn't want you to be a doormat either. And I would say, I think he kind of does.
Is that whole turn the other cheek?
Yeah. I think he's saying, let me do the fighting. let me take care of this. I will administer justice. And that's hard. I'm not saying it's easy, but I think that's the message more than take up your guns and fight.
Yeah, it's so interesting. In collaboration with Nick Ripkin's ministry and a lot of his insights about the persecuted church, he does emphasize in some of our conversations and some of his conference speaking what the result of us militarizing or the type of response that says pushback would mean. Yeah. It would mean that we're going to send people whom we know need the gospel to a Christless eternity in hell.
Mm-hmm.
So before we use the gun to influence them, the gospel should be presented and be the point of confrontation.
Right.
They may not receive the gospel because not all do, but at the same time, you condemn them to a Christless eternity in hell.
Right.
By going and just blowing them away. And I think we maybe should remember that in reference to even other terror groups that are out there, Hamas. I know there's some geopolitical things that are going on out there. And, there's a part of me that's just like, man, wipe Hamas off the face of the earth. Like if there's some kind of strategic way that everybody who's tortured somebody or killed somebody can just have justice immediately executed them by the state, like that should happen. Like no women or children in collateral damage or anything, but just figure out how to do that and like make that happen. And there's that sense of justice within me. But I think you're right, Jason, to remind us that vengeance belongs to the Lord. He will repay, and that there will always be in this side of glory an imbalance of the people who should receive the just penalty of their sin and those who don't.
Right.
And that in reference to ourselves.
This gentleman, Carino, I don't know if you give his comment up here, because I think he's hearkening back to the Old Testament. Though, if you see his comment, thinking about Old Testimony stories, though, fighting against evil. I'm not saying that we should not try to stop evil. There's precedent in Scripture to say when the righteous do nothing and evil continues to expand or to grow, we all suffer. So I'm all for trying to find ways to combat evil, and even governments have to do this, right? There are times to go to war to stop it, okay? And but what I'm saying is the gospel, the church's mission and the Christian's mission is not justice merely on earth. And you make up the point, which I don't think is discussed a lot in churches, and we're having this discussion right now in my own church. We don't talk about hell at all. We just don't discuss the final condemnation. It's one thing to die, okay? It's another thing to spend eternity in God's wrath. So when you go over there and you start just blowing these people to hell, literally, right? You're sending them to God's eternal wrath. That may feel good to you, but that's not the kingdom of God. It's not the mission. That's not the Great Commission.
Yeah.
It seems so when you go over though and you find the way to speak to their heart, like what is it Isaiah says, blessed are the feet of those who bring the good news of the gospel. Have you ever heard the story of the indigenous missionary who was I think he was somewhere in South America, and he was bringing the gospel to these people, and he got to the community, and they rejected it, and they beat the fire out of him, and they beat the fire of him, and they kicked him out of the community. And then they happened, as they're turning back, they looked and saw that his feet were full of blood from his walking, right? And they come back and they realize that bloody feet in their culture was something sacred. And they brought him back into them and said, okay, now explain to us what's going on. What is this gospel? And he wound up winning over the village. Had he not suffered the walk to get there, had he not suffered the beating through all that, had he not withstood all that so that they could see the bottom of his feet, this people would not have seen the gospel. Well, that's a whole other perspective. Because what we would have said is, no, you go back and you start beating the fire, you club them, you do all this, and you'll do all that. That's just not what we're seeing. Even in the New Testament, Paul was stoned almost to death. And what does that homeboy do? He gets back up and he walks back into Lystra and he proclaims the gospel. He doesn't mount a revolution. He doesn't grab a bunch of people who agree with him and take over the city with violence and usher in the kingdom of God through violence. No, he comes back in and he preaches a message.
Christian nationalists, y'all listen to this today?
You know what I'm saying? So anywhere I turn around, I know that we have to have this balance where we stop evil. And I'm not even saying I have all the solutions to it. I'm just saying there are times when the government needs to step in to control evil. I get that. That's why we have laws. That's why we have police. That's why we have even militaries. I'm just not comfortable with the idea of going to militarizing a group of people to fight back against Islamist, when I think the better way is the Great Commission being fulfilled in the Dominican Republic. So our answer would be missionaries, lots of them, lots of missionaries.
Okay, I'm going to make this and thank you so much for that, Jason. That was incredible. I'm going to make this a little bit more uncomfortable today because I'm going to ask this question, maybe posit it this way. One of the responses, an obvious response to this, is that these people from the Democratic Republic of Congo flee from the places of persecution, and they begin the long and arduous trek to surrounding nations. There are people who are experiencing various forms of persecution or are coming to America to seek asylum. And you know where I'm going with this. To seek asylum. The sentiment in America is we don't want people coming into our country illegally. Let me bring immigration into this as well.
Why not? Why not?
Yeah. Why not? Why not? We don't want people coming into our country illegally, but are we saying that we don't want people coming into our country at all? Is that also what we're saying? What if they come from a situation like this, and there's some people who are brought from this terrible atrocity, and they're brought into the borders of the United States, or make their way into the borders of the United States to seek asylum and to tell somebody this is what we're fleeing from? Do we have a problem with that? Would we have a problem with that in our country? I feel like in some cases, maybe we would, because of our sentiment and the way that we've conflated the whole illegal immigration and sort of delegitimized the whole asylum part of it. Let me listen to a little bit more of this because he does strike out some points that we've been talking about.
And the problem is that there's going to be huge problems with this. The problem is that first of all, the reason why this doesn't get as much traction as, say, the conflict, the Palestinian suffering in Gaza, is because there's just not that many reporters on the ground. And the Congo is a huge, dangerous place.
It's the ghetto.
To be a reporter. And frankly, also, there's just a fair amount of ideological indifference to anti-Christian violence on the part of reporters in the West.
And Dexter, I think that's the question. If you were to replace 70 Congolese Christian with any other minority group, 70 Palestinians were beheaded, 70 people at a pride parade were beheaded. This would be the biggest news story of the decade. And yet this just happened and no one's reporting on it. And literally crickets.
Right. And it's like that with Boko Haram when they murder people in Nigeria.
That's right. Haram. Yeah. I remember that.
There's basically crickets.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we have essentially kind of an anti-Christian bias on the part of people who run the media. And the thing is that I think there's another factor is that essentially Christianity has been lumped in with essentially this whole notion of settler colonialism, and that whatever violence is directed their way is largely a consequence of the violence perpetrated by Christians in years past. But I'm going to tell you, I lived in Zaire, I lived in the DRC when it was called Zaire. And one of the reasons why I became a much more devout Christian was because of the church that I went to every Sunday morning as a volunteer. Okay. And and I would go and talk to the local pastor when I had like spiritual crises as a volunteer. And the thing is that so what has happened is that Black African Christians, okay, have suffered the consequences of hostility towards Western civilization and Christianity itself, in part because people don't care what happens to Christians unless
either they don't know,
or
they don't know, or they don't care about what's going on in the hood.
That's
Ice
it.
Cube.
Out of
it
sight,
can be blamed.
out of mind.
And part of it has to do with the fact that if the perpetrators are dark-skinned, well, then we're going to have to give them a pass. And it's a very, very strange milieu.
Black on black crime. Is that what he's saying?
But
That's what he said.
the thing is that
Let me interpret that as someone who's black. He just talked about black on black crime. That's what he just said. That's what he just said.
Unfortunately, this is the cynical side of me. I've been somebody that has documented hostility towards Israel for the past 20 years. But if the IDF were responsible for these,
I don't even know if CBN knew that he was going to go this direction.
Okay.
They might expunge
Okay.
this from their, I'm going to play this
Yeah.
before they expunge this from their records.
beheadings, it would have made the front page of the Washington Post and the New York Times and every newspaper throughout the world. And there would be, Israeli Jews condemning it as well. But the problem is that because it's essentially black on black violence.
Oh,
What did he just say?
He just said it.
Paper throughout the world. And there would be, Israeli Jews condemning it as well. But the problem is that because it's essentially black on black violence, nobody cares. And there was a book called Stealth Conflicts by a scholar by the name of Virgil Hawkins, and he's a tremendous scholar. And he documented the number of newspaper articles about the civil war in the Congo. And this was at a point of time when 5.4 million people have died. There were a few dozen newspaper articles or a few dozen news shows or segments on it. But then when you looked at the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians, which every one of the deaths is tragic. We're talking at this time, maybe over a time frame of maybe 30 to 40,000 people had died. There were literally thousands of articles. So there were more articles than there were people killed at during a specific period of time. And it had to do with, first of all,
because it wasn't the ghetto, it was the suburbs. That was a great analogy that you gave, Jason. We could. He's going to talk about getting a meal. He's going to talk about getting a meal in Israel and how cushy that job is compared to going to the Democratic Republic of Congo.
It was in people's interest that this conflict be covered. And more importantly, it was just easier to go to cover. The violence in the Congo is a huge country. It's kind of desolate. If you go there, there's a very good chance you're going to get very sick and you may not get good medical care. That was something that I experienced as a Peace Corps volunteer. Go to Israel. You can have a nice meal at a restaurant in Jerusalem the evening after you basically covered a protest at the security barrier.
He said a lot, Jason. We need to respond to this. We need to respond. I
mean, I know there's some folks who be like, man, you always turn it back to the race card. No,
we play the race card.
but there is just no denying the evidence. He's right. It's just easier to cover Israel. It's just easier. And it's more pleasant. And it's more thrilling. Because, the Congo doesn't refer to Bible prophecy. Like, where's the Congo in Bible prophecy? Right? And on top of that,
to do with anything.
Like I said, it's more sophisticated. It's, shall we say, whiter. It's black on black crime. Typical. That's just typical. I'm just hearing the arguments of people listening, maybe saying, well, that's just how black people are.
Woke show.
Right? They're just violent. So that just makes sense. And haven't we heard that before in even American racial discussions? That we don't, we just come to expect the black community to be violent or something. Is that the same thing being projected at the Congo? Well, I
think there are some differences, but then there are some similarities.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I think he's onto something. I think he's onto something.
Is he cooking?
It's easier to go cover news in the suburbs than it is in the ghetto.
He's
you
cooking.
Run for your life in the suburbs.
Yeah. Let's go. Okay. I got a delay over here. The internet is curious.
I think it's exactly what you're saying. It's selective outrage, and there's this
selective outrage. Okay,
talking about Israel in the news, and you hear it a lot, which is this: if there's no Jews, There's no
No
news.
news.
You know, right across the border in
I
Syria,
haven't heard that
Oh!
before. No
million
Jews,
Syrians.
no news. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay. Man, that's got
Okay.
levels. That's got levels to it. I mean,
Okay. We might have to talk about this next week because
there's
this
no Jews, there's no news.
no Jews, no news.
Man,
Which is
man,
this?
that's got levels to it.
There's no
That
Jews.
that's a story in of
There's no
itself.
news. You know, right across the border in Syria, some people have estimates of close to 1 million Syrians died, and I think your point is very insightful and very spot on. Let's all be praying for these.
Yeah, let's all be praying.
Yeah.
No Jews, no news.
Man, we have discussed that in the music industry. We've discussed that in Hollywood. We've discussed that in theology with Israel. We've discussed that. I mean, there's so many levels to that statement.
There's levels. There's levels to this, my friend.
That. Yeah.
We're gonna have to wrap up this show this week with some way forward takes on this, and so we may need to do another week. We may need to do another week. So
yeah,
I want you to go first. And actually, I want to go first today. Can I go first?
Yeah. Hey, listen, let me put my brother first.
Okay, I'm gonna go first.
Government officials insist that
Well, Jason and I have figured out numerous ways, and I'm sorry for the delay that's here. You know, the internet could not keep up with as fast as we were going through all of this material. We talked about immigration. We didn't really even get to that today. We talked about perceptions, mentalities, but here's the deal. I just want to bring it for the church, for my people. If I'm sitting with a group of my people and we're all sitting, you know, face to face, knee to knee, whatever it is, hand to hand, hip to hip, whatever that moniker is in terms of community. If I could just talk to my people, I would just say our hearts, because puberty is not struck fully yet, but our hearts need to continually be engaged in recognizing the humanity and the far-reaching effect of the gospel. Does that mean that you need to go over there and be a reporter in the Congo? I don't believe that means that for probably anybody that's watching today. Does that mean that you need to go down to your local media outlet and demand that they cover this? I don't think that it means that. That might be a response of some, but I don't think that there's anybody that's watching today or anybody that I would say in smaller community needs to respond that way. But what we do need to respond with is the gospel. Because just like Jason and I have talked about on this show numerous times, some of the seeds of discord, some of the seeds of Satan, some of the seeds of hatred that are found in all of these stories, interlaced in all of these stories, are the things that are found in our communities. This story is across the ocean. We, you know, at least I can't say for Jason, but for myself, joke about the nature of some of the ethnic curious nature of what's going on there. But don't we have that here in the United States? Don't we have that in our communities? Don't we have some of the same thoughts and tendencies and attitudes and perceptions? And I would just say, I will confess, in my heart, far too many times, my mentality has been, well, you know, those are those people over there. I'm not so concerned about that. Far too many times in my heart has my response been, we just need to circle the wagons and do what we do best here. We just need to pay attention to what's right in front of us. And I would say, honestly speaking, stories like this remind me that on a global level, you can't ever stop thinking globally because, one, the Great Commission calls us to that, make disciples to the ends of the earth. And then two, when you start thinking about the eschatological view that we are all moving toward, we will spend eternity in heaven with people who didn't come from our zip code, the 75125 in Nashville. And so there is a far-reaching national, international scope to what it is, every story, because these are our brothers and sisters that we will be with in heaven. They made it there before we did. But should we all reach glory, and when we all reach glory, those of us who are in Christ Jesus, who are covered by the blood of Christ, what a day of rejoicing that will be, because things like this that are vengeance and violence and bloodshed, he will wipe away every tear from our eyes. And I look forward to that. But until I get there, may the Lord soften my heart and our hearts to follow him more nearly.
Yeah, that's good. My thoughts as I was thinking about this whole thing. First of all, just never lose sight of the image of God. I don't care as you're looking at news and you're watching stories, and we can make so many different. We can. How do you want to put this? You can have all these ideas about people, and so many of them can be so far-reaching from the image of God. These people are like animals. These people are like this, or they deserve this, or they deserve that, or they're so corrupt they can't get it together. Just never lose sight of the image of God, and the church can never do that. These are human beings made in the image of God who desperately need the gospel, both the Islamists and the ones who were martyred. And so for me, just to protect my heart against that, don't just sit in my chair, watch this news, and forget that aspect of it. Two, as a pastor and inside of a church, I need to constantly be reminding myself in the church of the Great Commission. We always have to be about the mission, always. The thing that's going to attack the darkness is not violence, it's going to be light. And the light comes from the gospel. And the gospel has to be proclaimed. And not just across the street, but in the Congo, which means we have to be raising up men and women who are willing to go to the Congo and willing to spend their lives in poverty, getting sick from the food, potential violence. And it even means potentially losing your sons and daughters to this, which means, fourthly, you have to have a good eschatology. What's at the end of all this? It's not living the best life now. It's not living your American dream with your picket fence and your cars. The end of this whole thing is Jesus reigning as king. That's what this is. And we're trying to get to that place. We always keep our eyes fixed on the prize, and so that we can let goods and kindreds go, Martin Luther says, right? And to keep our hands loose. And I'm saying this as a father of 5 children, knowing that likely one of my children is going to be a missionary. I have it in my heart. I feel like one of them is going to do that. And they're going to go to a place that I'm going to be super uncomfortable with, because it's going to be that kind of place like the Congo. And you're going to have to trust the Lord that He's going to work out His will, and He's going to bring the gospel there. And that if you lose everything on this earth, we have not lost Christ. We have gained the kingdom of heaven. At the end of the day, Jesus is going to come back. He's going to restore all things, reverse the curse. Satan will be thrown into the lake of fire, and we will live under His righteous rule forever. That's the end of all this whole thing. So we have to keep our eyes fixed on that, especially when you see 70 of your brothers and sisters beheaded, realizing that as sad as that is, they're in heaven with Him, and they are going to reign with us one day. Until then, we have to be about the mission and get there, the way Erskin said it. So I just have to remind myself of these things. When I hear these stories, always be going through that kind of paradigm, if you will. And that's what I want to tell the church. Hey, be about the mission, be about the Great Commission, be about letting this world go and living radically for Jesus. If you love me, you will obey me all the way to the Congo.
Thank you for that, Jason. It has been another wonderful broadcast. Thank you for the comments that came in while we were speaking there. We will keep the comment section going all the way to the end of the show, but by you guys making comments all throughout the show, even if they didn't make it on the screen, it does let the algorithm know that there's an important conversation that's going on there. So thank you. Comment. Even put some gobbledygook up there until the end of the show. Thank you guys so much. Another episode of The Way Forward is in the books, and we will be back next week, Lord willing. Should He return before then, hopefully we will all who are watching this be able to get to glory through the work of Jesus Christ. God bless.